Hi, I'm Megan. Welcome to today's live reading of Unmasking a Cowgirl by Rachelle, Paige, Campbell, presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Join me. Chapter 1. Some days, Abby Whit forgot she was hiding behind an alias. After 2 years and change of living in Hurd, Montana, she fully embraced her cover story as a food truck chef passing through town. To anyone who asked, she was working for herself after stints of being the sous chef for chefs from Kansas City to Las Vegas. Her family didn't put down roots. Those were the kernels of truth. But she'd arrived with a plan. Determine the public's perception of her family and assess the feasibility of taking back her land. On the frosty March morning, she parked her food truck in the gravel lot behind the bright red barn on the Kincaid Ranch. Against the snowy backdrop and overcast sky, the new construction building popped amidst the open land that had been owned by one family for over a century. Credited with saving the local economy by modernizing their ranch into a cowboy spa, Hank and grandson Ryan Kincaid were undisputed winners in the town's founding family's feud. Her family, the Whittiers, were the first losers. The good citizens of Hurd considered her ancestors the villains in the town's history. If she had given her full name on arrival, she had been kicked out of the state. Hating the Kincaids on principle, given her history, would have been expected. Prejudice hadn't suited her. They had never questioned her sudden appearance and purpose in the tight-knit community. They'd supported and encouraged her. Their kindness was the reason she continued to debate, finally making her legal claim to the small patch of land near the church where she parked her food truck. The deadline approached. The hum of the idling truck wasn't loud enough to silence her whirring thoughts. Helping out others in the community had been equally about establishing good karma for herself and treating others with the kindness she valued. No one had been better to her than the Kincaids. She didn't think she'd done nearly enough to redeem herself in their eyes once they'd learned the truth. Joe would surely be highlight to her villainy. Joe would be sure to highlight her villainy. She shuddered. Joe Staunch, middle school teacher and ranch tour guide, was her very vocal critic. She was careful to never cause anyone offense, and yet somehow she had made an enemy of him. He either ignored her or complained about her, often within her earshot. Some people rubbed each other wrong. She accepted that fact. The trouble was that she liked him. Her heart wouldn't be reasoned into submission. She cut the engine and exited the truck, leaving the vehicle unlocked. An icy breeze whipped past her, burning her ears and carrying the scent of a nearby fire. She crunched the gravel under her feet as she made her way to the barn. While she agonized over the decision, she only had two choices. Either she claimed her inheritance, or she gave up on it forever. Security lingered so near she could almost smell the roasting meat in proper ovens and feel the stability of the solid walls and roof from her own restaurant on her land. She couldn't stall much longer. She didn't want the town to feel betrayed. She'd betrayed them. She hadn't told bald-faced lies. Neither had she shared the complete truth. The side doors stood slightly ajar. Muffled, deep voices carried out. She slipped inside and rubbed her hands together. "Hello," she called, her teeth chattering from nerves and the low temperatures. "We're here," Hank Kincaid replied. She blew on her icy fingers and approached the men standing in the center of the room. "Sorry, the new furnace arrives by the end of the week," Ryan Kincaid said. He stood next to several toolboxes and a stack of drywall. "No bother," she said, waving off any concern, like she didn't notice the unfinished walls with wires poking out and gaps visible in the boards. A little spray foam insulation and a working system would solve the heating problem. "I hope the first week in June is warm enough and we won't have to be concerned with turning on the heat. I don't want to add fixed furnace to either Hank's 90th birthday extravaganza or the wedding budget." She plastered on a smile to stop her teeth from chattering. "Bad luck to replace the furnace twice in 1 year," Hank Kincaid shook his head. "Makes me worried about what the third calamity will be." "Doesn't the fire count as the first strike of poor luck?" Ted Sterling frowned. "Rebuilding this barn from the ground up is at the top of my list of bad things." She darted her gaze between the three cowboys. The oldest, white-haired and permanently tanned, Hank Kincaid, often touted tired cliches and old wives' tales as guiding life principles. No, that was last year's number 2 after my trip to the hospital. Hank's grandson and heir, Ryan, rolled his eyes. Standing well over 6 feet and with a perpetual scowl, he was the town's stalwart visionary. Practical and forward-thinking, he had revitalized his family's legacy and the entire community through a clear and unexpected plan. He didn't waste time looking for signs of divine intervention. The third, Ted Sterling, was the thoughtful ranch hand turned trusted confidant. Often found stroking his jaw in consideration, the slim man with thin streaks of silver threading his dark hair didn't jump to conclusions. He had been hired to work cattle and over the past decade switched direction to managing people. Abby had overheard the stories enough from Joe. She almost imagined a first-hand recollection despite only living in the town for 2 years. For the past decade plus, the 3 men guided the town to an unprecedented economic recovery thanks to their varying character qualities, forming a strong pyramid. If one side wobbled, the other 2 assumed the weight of the struggles. And balanced the load. What would they do when her revelation rocked them all? Wasn't there a number 3? Was there a number 3 last year? She asked. Hank tapped a finger against the deep cleft in his chin. I don't think there was, unless you count Colby's trip to the vet after she ate that pan of brownies. Colby, a rescue mutt, was arguably more human than dog. She hadn't been shaken by her life or death accident over Thanksgiving weekend. Meg, her owner and Ryan's fiance, however, had been an emotional wreck. No more of this talk. Ryan held up his hands. Don't even put that energy out into the universe. We have too much going on in the next few months for anyone to go looking for a curse or believing in superstition. Hank nodded and turned, flashing crossed fingers behind his back. Abby glanced at Hank's crossed fingers and snorted. She rubbed a hand over her face. Sorry, must be allergies. Why did you need us to stop by today? Joe Staunch asked, his voice carrying from the sliding glass doors in the center of the back wall overlooking the deck behind the building. Couldn't this be a phone call or email? He asked as he approached. Abby gaped. She was well versed in his curt words, but had never heard him so short with his friends and bosses. In the summer, Joe served as a tour guide for groups interested in historical excursions on the ranch. Yes, keep us on task. Thanks, Joe, Ryan said, glaring. I wanted you both to get a sense of the space. Abby, we have added a small prep station, but besides the sink, dishwasher, and single oven, there's not a fully functioning kitchen. She nodded, pleased for the prep area. Can I park the truck close to that space? Yes, we have a service store leading to a spot for you with hookups, Ted said. The plan for Hank's 90th birthday and wedding has expanded. She widened her gaze and met Joe's. As reluctant partners, she'd hoped for a second of commiseration to thaw his icy demeanor. He shook his head and glanced away. He wore his disapproval and doubt like a pair of well-worn jeans. Whether he liked it or not, they were tied to each other. They were stuck together in planning the event. For the better part of 10 months, she had been working on her contribution, catering, and communicating mostly by email to Joe. She trusted him to carry his weight, not that he shared much of his progress. Meg and I have decided since we are only getting married once, we need to do it right, Ryan said. No more simple ceremony. We want a full weekend of events. Oh, Abby tipped her head to the side, unsure she followed what that meant. Ryan's fiancée, Meg, wasn't the sort to make a big fuss. A full weekend could include multiple events on each day. She'd have to carefully plan the menus if she was expected to cater everything. She wouldn't want to repeat any meals. The birthday celebration remains on Friday night. Saturday will be the rehearsal dinner. Sunday will be the wedding, Ryan said. Abby nodded. Including one more event, the rehearsal dinner wouldn't sap her creative spirit. Her worst-case scenario had been avoided, but didn't alleviate all of her concerns. She would be doing a lot of cooking in a short amount of time. She couldn't turn down the opportunity. To stay in town, she needed to expand her business. She'd started a catering side hustle on the ranch to pad her bottom line. With more events, she needed more space and capacity. Her truck didn't have the refrigerator space to store enough food for 3 days of events. She'd have to use the space she could find at the Kincaid's house and ask her friend James Rabbit at the Golden Crown Saloon, the only full-service restaurant in town. She knew he'd agree for the special one-time only weekend. If she wanted to be the go-to caterer for the ranch's new wedding and event business, she needed a better plan. I have one, but it'll make everybody hate me. Let me see what I can do. She smiled until her cheek twitched. She hated the chicken and egg predicament she landed herself in, but neither could she turn her back on the easiest solution: claim her inheritance and build.